Good morning. Young people populations, the future is for anyone who dreams of it. That is the title of my presentation today. I will be speaking about who we are speaking of when we talk of key populations and what is important to us. I will also be speaking about what sort of support do we require, the things that matter to us and the things that you should remember, and more on where to find out about the key population that I'll be speaking of. To start it off, I will speak about who we are when we speak of key populations. Overall, key populations and their sexual partners account for about 62% of all new infections worldwide. That was in 2019. We are at risk of HIV because of criminalization, prejudice, stigma, discrimination, and violence. Young people from the key population sector, like myself, they are especially vulnerable because of the criminalizing laws, the unfavorable policies, and the different social experiences and expectations that we face from our communities. Young people account for a disproportionate number, around 1/3 of all new infections worldwide in people over 15 years of age. We are speaking of people who live with HIV, we're speaking of LGBTI identifying persons, young people who sell sex, and young people who use drugs. Now, what are our priorities and our needs? We speak of mental health as if it's something so basic that everyone can access. However, mental health is still a big issue in our region, particularly because of social-cultural expectations and the norms. Making our own decisions about our health and bodies is another issue. This particularly affects the trans queer community, who continuously have to battle their identity with the service providers. Respect also forms part of this, and confidentiality. There is a lot of fear of those who sell sex, or perhaps those who use drugs, of being reported to the police. Social protection and support. I'm talking about nutrition, jobs, poverty. We are still disproportionately affected by this because of the stigma, because of the prejudice. The ease to access to youth-friendly services, that is still a priority for us. When we speak of nothing for us without us, we speak exactly to the ease of access, because only us can know what support we need. Maternal health services and information on pregnancy and abortion. I'm speaking of countries where you are still reminded that you are young and therefore cannot make a sound decision about your body. All of this needs to stop. Omran says our services are not mapped out. We don't know where to go and access the services we desire as young key populations. This makes access to services a nightmare. Now, the Love Alliance is a new initiative involving the global network of young people living with HIV and AIDS funds and other partners indeed across Africa. Together, they are committed to protecting, promoting, and fulfilling sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR, globally, unifying people who use drugs, sex workers, the LGBTQ community, young people who live with HIV, and amplifying the diversity of voices in these communities. The Love Alliance recently held a global youth consultation. Young people living with HIV had an opportunity to share their experiences, and this is just one of the problems that was described. Now, some of these challenges that we face include violence. They include stigma. They include discrimination. But when we speak about violence against women and girls, it's important that we pay special attention, because young women and young girls all over Africa are still a target, not because of patriarchy alone, but because of these unfavorable policies that I speak of. Finding accurate information at school and in the community is another problem because of the prejudice and this treatment that we face as young people within the key populations community. Criminalization is another issue. There are vagabond and petty laws that are used across the region, which in fact criminalize being poor. I'm speaking about laws that target sex workers, and I'm talking about laws that target men who have sex with men, particularly the LGBTQ community. The laws of consent are another issue. Many countries have still not taken serious the issue of consent age being 18. Stigma and discrimination in health facilities were seen by young key populations as one of the biggest barriers to accessing services in each country. Experiences including being gossiped about, being called names, being laughed at, and even being refused services. Information young people interviewed knew condoms protected against STI did not know where to get them from. 67 countries criminalize same-sex intimacy. This is in Africa alone, when internationally they account to over 74 countries. This gets to show you that there is still a big problem in Africa that needs to be addressed to ensure that young key populations access information on sexual reproductive health and rights. Now, Ruela says stigma and discrimination by healthcare providers affects us from accessing services. There is a need to engage young people in service delivery. This indeed is what I speak of when I say there's nothing for us without us. Some of the real life experiences of young people at risk include those who inject drugs in India, those who are at high risk behavior and low use of harm reduction services. Research in different regions in India has shown that young people who inject drugs have a high incidence of HIV than older people who inject drugs. They engage in more risky behavior, which include needle sharing, unsafe sex practices, and they are less likely to seek out harm reduction services. Together, this puts them at a greater risk. Now, young women who sell sex in Zimbabwe, they speak of structural barriers preventing condom use. Now, the research on these young women in Zimbabwe has found that they had high levels of knowledge about the efficiency of condoms, and yet they are unlikely to use them. But why is this? One of the main reasons for this is the structural barriers they face. For example, violence or the fear of violence can stop women and girls from negotiating safer sex. This is particularly a challenge for sex workers. Female sex workers are 10 times more likely to acquire HIV than other women. Tan in Southeast Asia says, when we want to access services such as hormones and surgery for transgender people, such services are not available at the healthcare facilities. But why is this? Why do we continue to struggle as the trans queer community? These are some of the issues that need to be addressed. However, let's now turn to what can be done to support us. We need an improved service provider's attitude. We need to remove all of these laws that criminalize us. We need to reform the age of consent laws and policies. We need to mentor us and build our own capacity to engage in decision-making. This includes funding our own organizations. Remember, I said nothing for us without us. We need to increase funding for services that meet our needs and develop integrated youth-friendly services that include one-stop shops. We need to make our services free. Now, sensitizing and training healthcare workers on the HIV and SRH and harm reduction need young key populations. We need to make sure that they understand the importance of privacy and confidentiality. We need to focus on the facilities that young people access and share the best practices. We need to offer services during times when young people are available, increase virtual services, especially information and counseling. These young people are always on social media anyway. We need to increase staffing levels to decrease the waiting times and distribute self-testing HIV and STI kits. We are young, we are wild and free. Research found these interventions work. Now let's speak about the interventions that have been shown to work. Community-based service providers, particularly peer-to-peer. This works because we are speaking amongst ourselves as young people. Remember, nothing for us without us. Easily accessible services online or in convenient locations with short waiting times. We need tailored services. We need free and subsidized services and commodities, confidential services. We need to be able to use familiar faces to reinforce health messages. According to the Young, Wild and Free research carried in 2020, key populations led in Russia, Kenya, and South Africa and Vietnam, community-based services providers are seen to be friendlier and to have more expertise about key populations, especially if they employ or are led by the key populations themselves. Young people are also more likely to trust peers and community service providers and feel they treat them with respect and guarantee their confidentiality. Confidential service is very important for young people who fear discrimination and criminalization. Sex workers, for example, have asked for services to be offered in secret so that they are not discovered. Young people need more accurate information about HIV and STI. Campaigns using social media influencers, well-known local figures, example, nightclub owners, familiar community activists have all been shown to work. Most of all friends and peer educators are proven to be trusted with such information. Remember, nothing for us without us. Now, what are the things that you need to remember as I wrap up my presentation today? Language matters. Listen to the language we use and how we describe ourselves. No one wants to be described as something that they do not identify with. Listen to us, trust us, and use language that works for us. Respect our diversity. Young people come in every shape, size, and one solution will not fix us all. We are not a homogeneous society. You need to respect our diversity. Make sure interventions are gender sensitive. Some people may not identify as they may seem to present. Respect that and allow people to identify as they wish. So you can find out more by looking out for the new World Health Organization guidelines of key populations. They are under review right now, but you can also see the UNAIDS 2021 report on young people. You can also see the 2015 report on youth engagement from the UNAIDS. You can also see resources available on Shiva. Thank you very much.